I say all the time that it's really hard, especially in the first week of the season. And I joke that this is probably my least favorite podcast to do in the entire year because we're 3 games in for most teams in the regular season at this point, and you just get hot takey with it, or you fall into the trap. Sometimes you fall into the narratives early on, and it's overreaction because at the end of the day, it's October basketball. But we have a job to do. Notably, apparently, Justin hates this episode too because he took off today. So I am joined by the one and only Nick Gryniewicz. Follow him on Twitter at GetNickG, the play-by-play voice for the Lakeland Magic. You've heard him on this podcast a couple times now. Anyway, but I mean, yeah, here we are. I mean, back at it again. We'll talk Magic in a little bit because there's a lot to talk about with Paolo Banchero, especially historically great in his debut. But first, on this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast, we are going to start with the Lakers. Unfortunately, because I feel like I start this episode off being like, oh, I want to avoid the traps. I won't do that. We got to talk about the Lakers. The Lakers are 0-3 because I mean we knew what it kind of was going into the season. I mean I don't think anybody realistically had them being contenders, but you maybe thought they'd kind of be around that lower play-in range. The roster is a little iffy. And I don't want to keep beating the dead horse because I feel like that's what it's got to with Russell Westbrook at this point, right? But it almost hasn't in a way though. Like it's gotten to such a poor, like almost tragically bad level at this point. I mean, he's going to play the rest of this contract out, but we're at 10.3 points right now, just 4 assists, shooting percentage of a cool 28% per game, 8%. Yeah, literally 8% from behind the arc. And it all kind of got summed up, right? Like it felt like, did you watch by chance, Nick, that Lakers and Portland game the other night?
I caught bits and pieces of it. Yeah. Like I saw the LeBron logo 3 air ball, right?
Which is hilarious.
We are going to enjoy SportsCenter all season long, just doing the LeBron body language doctor stuff where he is just he's done with this team. I don't know if we've seen LeBron out on a team this quickly before. We're 3 games into the year and already he's just like, you know what? I'm good. Thanks. Actually, the last time I think he was out this much on a team was his final year in Cleveland, right? When they pulled off the Isaiah Thomas trade and all of that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say I thought you were going to go even way back in 2010. I'm like, even then they were in the conference finals. We're 3 games in the season right now. This season for LeBron, I hate to boil it down to individual achievements, but it sure does feel like the key at this point is just pass Kareem, like break the scoring record, continue to go. But yeah, I mean, it's a bleak, tough situation for the roster right now. But I mean, with Westbrook, this is so spectacularly failed even more this year, which just I didn't think was a possible level. Mm-hmm. I don't know what it would take. And I mean, I guess there's always somebody. And if you attach 2 first rounders to it at this point, but that's insane that you'd have to attach 2 first rounders to an expiring contract that is up at the end of the year. I don't want to fire the cannons too early in the podcast, but I'm going to fire the cannons early in the podcast. Like, is Russell Westbrook going to be out of the NBA next year?
I think so. I think so. I mean, and I'm not trying to be hot takey either, but I'm thinking if there was a Russell Westbrook trade where a team would take 1 first round pick, wouldn't it happen? So, I mean, I think that he's on his way to the trade, buyout, and then China. Is that what we're looking at? Like, I mean, this is the Stephon
I can't
Marbury.
See him doing that.
Really?
No, I can't. No, I can't see Russell Westbrook playing. It's not going to reach that point. Like the best case scenario is, in my opinion, is it happens like Carmelo Anthony, right? Where you kind of, it's just like it hits rock bottom. You maybe finally, reevaluate a little bit and, adapt to a different role, whether it's coming off the bench. Because I mean, that's what Carmelo's done. It's got him these past few years with Portland and with the Lakers now. It's really, really tough to see Russ doing that. I can't see him playing. Like, Russ has made $1 zillion, and he's way too good to be playing overseas like that. Like, that just feels such like, I would just be sad for Russell Westbrook at that point. Like, it'd be different if he was in his 40s or something like that. Like, if you're in your 40s and you want to go overseas in Europe, like, Russell Westbrook is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Like, I don't want to see my first ballot Hall of Famer playing for the Shanghai Sharks next year. Like, it's crazy. It's just wild, though, that it is at a point where I'm like, I can't believe that I'm debating that Russ should maybe just retire at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that if it wasn't such a bright stage and if there wasn't so much discussion about it, maybe we would be headed in that direction. But kind of Russ is the kind of guy too, where if you tell him enough that it's not going to work, he's got that attitude, right? He's coming out of the tunnel fighting fans already. We're 3 games into the season, but he's just not an effective ball player anymore, not at all. And Darvin Ham is trying to make it work, but the shooting isn't there. The finishing of the rim, Zach Lowe talked about this last week on ESPN, where it's just the finishing at the rim isn't there for him. So a lot of the things that even he used to do well, he's not doing it well. Kevin, as we're talking right now, the Lakers are 0-3 on the regular season. You count the preseason, they're 1-8. They're 1 win in their last 9 games. Like, they're just not competitive. And the fact that they're getting nothing out of Russell Westbrook is a huge factor in that.
No, and it's one of those situations too where you don't even have the incentive to be bad because the first round pick is gone for, by the way, for New Orleans, who is just salivating even more at the thought of what this pick could potentially look like. I don't think the Lakers are going to be worst team in the league bad. I'm not suggesting they're going to be near the number 1 pick. I think there are plenty of teams who are young, other teams by design that will be down there as well. But yeah, you look at the roster. I mean, with Russ specifically, again, it's that athletic type, right? Like Russ at his peak was so much faster and stronger and I mean, he just attacked the rim with such violence that guys couldn't match up. But when that goes away, it has the potential to get ugly quick. Like we've seen it with guys who aren't great shooters. And Russell Westbrook has just never been a great shooter his entire career. As that game, unfortunately, is faded. Like you said, the finishing at the rim, it's not there anymore. A lot of that athleticism is gone. And I mean, in the case of the Lakers, it's just tough too because they don't have the spacing. I mean, none of these guys are great shooters, like across the board. Up and down. Who's the best shooter on this roster? Are we talking about? I mean, if it's not LeBron, maybe are we talking Kendrick Nunn? Are we talking Austin Reeves? Like, what are we doing right here?
The best shooter on the roster is Devin Kennedy, who got traded to the South Bay Lakers last week. That's the best shooter in the Lakers organization right now.
It's really tough. And like we said, there's no real end in sight. I don't know what I mean. You're off the Russell Westbrook deal next year, so it's not like you're just hamstrung for the next few. But it's tough to watch. It's at a point where I actively feel bad, and I do think there's a part of me that maybe shouldn't as much because it feels like I go back to that quote from the beginning of the season already, where like Russ has that hamstring issue, and he's blaming the one game he came off the bench. Like it's like, you're kidding me. So what happens at halftimes? Like what happened? Like come on, Russ, you kidding me? You come off the bench one time, and that's why you got injured. And so that's the part of me that doesn't feel bad, but I mean it does. It's just I don't think I've remembered a player that was as good as he was at his peak that's just gone south the way he has as quickly as he has. It's unfortunate.
You normally see it, like, honestly, it reminds me of like NFL running backs. That's what it reminds me of. It's like guys that for, a 3 to 4 year stretch are just best in the league. And then all of a sudden, they're being cut and they can't find another roster spot. So I think a lot of it just has to do with what you mentioned. It's the athleticism that Russ played with. It was as soon as he lost that step and that ability to get by the defender, that burst, the rest of his game really was just a product of that athleticism. So the Lakers are going to need to kind of figure it out if they want to try to, make something of this season. And I don't know for us. This isn't the first year we've seen this. This is probably like a 3 or 4 year regression, that we've watched.
Yeah, it's just gotten really bad this fast. Like it last year, the fluctuations were always high, but at worst, it felt like Russ was like an NBA rotation player. Now it's like, when he's off, he's unplayable.
Yeah, that's the thing. Let me ask you this, Kev. Over under 9.5. That Lakers first round pick.
Oh,
now I know it's going to go to New Orleans, but over under 9.5.
I think it's under. I think it's under for sure. I think they're one of the worst teams in the NBA. I mean, I'm looking at the standings now. I mean, with the 0-3 group, you've got Houston and Oklahoma City, who that shouldn't probably surprise anybody. The Magic, who maybe that shouldn't surprise anybody either. We'll talk about Paolo in a bit. The Sixers are 0-3. We'll get into that in a second. I mean, I don't want to be too much of a homer early on in the podcast. We can talk about that a little bit. The other 0-3 team is Sacramento, but Sacramento, I'm going to shoot some bail. They've had a really tough schedule to start. I mean, they lost by 7 to Portland, and that's a closer one, but they've had the Clippers and the Warriors, so I'm not exactly about to, really go after them for losing those games. And I mean, hell, even Golden State and the Clippers, like that's a 2 points of the Clippers. It's a 5-point one by Golden State. You've got Memphis coming up. So really just a brutal start to the schedule for Sacramento. On the other side of the coins, I mean, the other big story in the Western Conference early on has been the Utah Jazz, right? Like, hello, Utah, good morning. 3-0 to start the season, coming out gangbusting. Obviously, this is a team in lieu of trading Donovan Mitchell, in lieu of trading Rudy Gobert, that I think we all know are in the. I guess it's the. I don't know if we have a name yet for the Wembanyama sweepstakes. Winless for Wembanyama is the easy default. You could do the victory lists for Victor or something like that. I don't know if that flows as well, but I mean, there are a lot of vets on this team, and they've come out looking like they have something to prove. I mean, we knew Mike Conley, obviously, and Jordan Clarkson are there, but, give guys like Kelly Olynyk credit. Lauri Markkanen has been flamethrowing to start the season. And maybe there is a bit more talent in that regard. Like, maybe we all underestimated Utah a little bit in that sense, where it's like, yeah, you know what? There are a lot of vets on this roster early on. I also think, again, it'll get worse by design. Because they're going to trade a lot of these guys, especially if they keep playing like that. Restock the war chest anymore. But certainly a great start to the season for Utah.
Yeah, Danny Ainge isn't going to let them win that many games. I mean, he's going to make sure that Trader Danny is going to move a lot of these guys throughout the season if they keep winning like this. But I watched a lot of that New Orleans game they played the other night, and listen, they lose that game if Zion doesn't get hurt. They were also playing without Brandon Ingram too, so they've had a couple of lucky bounces. You could say that for anybody this early in the season, but you got to respect Utah for coming out. Those guys play hard. Mike Conley and Jordan Clarkson, especially, they've got pride. Those guys are vets. And Lauri Markkanen's trying to remake himself. I mean, I think a lot of people have forgotten about him since he was involved in the Jimmy Butler trade years ago, and Markkanen knows, I don't know if I'm going to get another usage situation like this where I'm going to get these kind of minutes and these kind of shots. Can I go after, put my name up there in the league so I can get some attention?
Yeah, I mean, when he certainly got included, he played some pretty big rotation minutes for Cleveland last year, but yeah, it's been a downward trend since his rookie year in Chicago. But you're 100% right with the usage, without a doubt. I mean, he's playing the most minutes on the roster right now at 37. Taking the most shots a game at 17. So I do think there's some context that needs to be added, but I mean, he's knocking these down. I mean, his overall field goal percentage is at 48. Like, he's at a 30% 3-point clip. You hope that goes up a little bit, but I mean, he's 25 years old. Like, even other guys that are getting a lot of minutes, Jared Vanderbilt's 23, Walker Kessler's 21. Those are guys realistically that, along with Colin Sexton, who we know is really the crown jewel of this now second rebuild, at least currently. I mean, those are guys that you could maybe see playing into a role for the future. I mean, the timeline isn't that long, to rule out 25 and 26-year-olds. So, I mean, that's kind of the fun of these teams, is you get to dig out the gems. You get to have guys who, put themselves in new situations and they thrive in them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you're Utah, though, regardless, you're trying to get yourself in that Wembanyama sweepstakes or Scoop or someone like that and see what you can do. For them, they're really going to start this rebuild with the draft pick that's coming up, and then the guys that fit. We watched this in Orlando for years, where you're really just trying to find a couple of guys around the edges, and then in Orlando's case, you find a Franz and you find a Paolo, and those are kind of your cornerstones there. So Utah doesn't even know what the roster is going to look like, but it's fun watching them win some games when no one expected it.
Yeah, and I mean definitely, like you said early on. I mean, if nothing else, they look competitive too. I think that's the one thing you can ask for. You mentioned Orlando. It looks like they have their superstar finally. I mean, and they've had, again, the foundation has been solid for a while, but it's been that one guy, and it looks like it already with Paolo Banchero, 3 games, averaging 23 points a game. Obviously, the debut is the one that everybody is talking about. Of course, the historical, 27, 5 and 5, first person as a rookie to put that up since LeBron James. And needless to say, great company to be in. And I mean, really what it is with Paulo, I guess the biggest surprise, if you will, or not a surprise, you knew he was NBA ready. That was kind of his billing, right? When he got drafted, is that he was the most NBA ready guy. Full disclosure, I had Jabari Smith number 1 on my board. I just thought he could do a little more. But Paolo looks way more ready than I think even
Polished.
the biggest optimists were looking for. And is it me? I mean, I think we talked about this on the side already, but he just seems more bouncy than he was at Duke.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. That's a good way to put it. Like, he just looks more polished, more bouncy. He looks, I know, as you said, he was billed as kind of being NBA ready. He looks more NBA ready than we saw at Duke. Like, I don't really know what they were doing with him last season, but you and I watched Duke play. We were in Asheville, North Carolina, watching Duke play. And I remember sitting there with you. I was like, so this is supposed to be the guy. You, me, and our buddy Chris Crawford. Like, this is supposed to be the guy that like goes number 1. And then honestly, when Paolo went 1, I was like, okay, they took, I don't want to say the safest pick. They took a guy that had the highest floor in Paolo. And I watched him the first 3 games of the season, and he is that cornerstone, I think, that you can really start to see a team build around him and Franz Wagner. But there has been, a 10 to 12 year gap for Orlando since they had a guy that they could hand the ball to and say, you know what, get us a bucket, big fella. And Paolo can do that, whether it's stepping back and shooting it from 3 or going by a defender. He had a dunk in Sunday night's game against the Boston Celtics. Now, Tatum had 40. So, but Paolo, I mean, he had a dunk in that game. Franz did too, where they just overpowered the defender and got to the rim. And Orlando hasn't had a guy or guys like that since the Dwight Howard teams that made the finals, in 08, 09, and had some of those deeper playoff runs. So watching Paolo, what he's able to do, he's miles away defensively. Like, he has a lot of work to do defensively. But on the offensive side, really, he can beat you from all 3 levels and adds a complexity to the Orlando offense. I guess a real threat is what it is, that now that gravitational pull of we got to keep an eye on Paolo makes life easier on some of the other guys that don't have the same sort of skills. It makes life easier on Franz Wagner, right? You hope Jalen Suggs can get back out there again soon. But when Markelle Fultz is out there, some of those slashing lanes are going to open up for him. So he really does fit on this roster. But I thought he was going to be good. I didn't expect him to look as polished and kind of bouncy, as you mentioned, as he does first 3 games of the year.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing too, I think that you kind of hit on with Suggs and with Fultz both being out, like, realistically, their guard play should get better. They're just kind of in a hole right now, right? Because even going back to the summer, like, you have Gary Harris who's missing time with the torn meniscus. You've got Fultz missing time. You've got Suggs missing time. Thankfully, that's not worse. But you're in a situation right now where your biggest healthy guards are Cole Anthony, Terrence Ross, and RJ Hampton. Like, that's not a long-term recipe for success. I do like how T. Ross has kind of, handled himself as the vet on this roster. Like, I think he looks more energized here than he has in a little bit. So that's kind of fun to see. But I mean, yeah, I think it'll naturally improve as well. I mean, we shouldn't be that long for Markelle Fultz coming back. So that alone. And I mean, I think that's, like you said, the biggest sigh of relief too is just Jalen Suggs not being hurt. Like, he already missed enough time last year. He doesn't need to miss an entire, like, you start to get worried if he misses large portions of the sophomore season.
Yeah, totally agree there. You want to get Suggs out there to get some minutes after missing major time last year. Where is Jonathan Isaac? Can you help me?
I don't know.
Anybody can we put him on a milk carton or something?
So here's the thing. Like, I don't want to give him full milk carton stats because he's been at practice. Like, he's been in, like, it feels like he's been in more team activities than he's been in quite a while. But yeah, I mean, this is like, I've always said that Jonathan Isaac is icing on the cake at this point. Like, if you get an even semblance of a healthy Jonathan Isaac back, I think it's all house money for the Orlando Magic. We know what he was. I believed in him. He had all the potential in the world, but just the reality is like, we haven't seen Jonathan Isaac play basketball since the bubble. Like, I want to see him again, but he feels like more of a concept than an actual player at this point.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, again, you just hope he can get out there. Just been completely snake bitten so far.
Yeah, I totally agree. But I mean, I guess we started this talking about the about the rookies, and I've thoroughly enjoyed watching kind of some of the different rookies throughout the season this year. But Paolo has kind of been the icing on the cake. Even I think if you're an NBA fan, seeing what he's been able to do with a relatively inexperienced Orlando roster. So yeah, I mean, like I've been overly surprised by how he's been able to step in and contribute right away. And it's been pretty efficient too. That's the other thing. It's like the numbers have been pretty good. It's not like, he's taken 20 shots a game or anything like that. He really, he's really kind of fit into this offense, which is what Jamal Mosley is going to demand.
Yeah, like you said, the biggest thing for improvement would be the defensive end. Like, he's definitely a work in progress, but I think everyone realistically should have known that with Banchero. Like, he wasn't built to be the best defense, and it's not a situation where I think like he's not a train wreck defensively. It'll get better. It's just, yeah, I think he needs to adjust the NBA speed a little bit. Like, there's still some work to do on that front. Like, nobody should sugarcoat it. You mentioned Boston, who was 3-0. Jason Tatum dropping 40 on you guys. And I mean, he dropped, that feels like 40 on the Sixers too. I forget what the exact number was. But they're starting off the season 3-0. Obviously, huge expectations for them this year to go back to the finals. A massive distraction at the beginning of the season with the Ime Udoka situation. But, here comes Boston not picking up a beat, or not missing a beat, I should say. I mean, Tatum in particular, 34.7 points a game right now. He's shooting 58% from the field, just absolutely making his presence felt on every end of the floor. I mean, we may talk MVP candidates later on in the episode, but he certainly early on looks like he's going to be in the conversation for that award. I mean, Milwaukee's sitting here at 2-0 as well, and I think if you're fans of either of those teams, like Justin and I build them as the top dogs. I think Milwaukee is the team to beat in the entire NBA, but like that's. We're pulling the tiniest of hairs when we're comparing Milwaukee and Boston. Like, I feel like we saw that last year. And again, I think Boston got a little bit better with that. And Malcolm Brogdon, who's looked great so far, like the early returns there are good. It's really hard to make an NBA finals again. But I will say Boston's depth, if there's a team that's going to push it in the East, like it feels like they've got a real shot.
Yeah, especially when they get Robert Williams back, right? They're waiting for him and are kind of running some lineups out there at times where, if Tatum and Smart and Brown aren't, if those three really don't have it going defensively, they're going to have a harder time. I mean, you're running Noah Vonleh out there, who was a +5 against Orlando, but I mean, he's a walking personal foul at times. The reason why I would bet on a team like Boston is because you have the young guys in, Brown and Tatum. I call them young. They're getting older and older, but they're kind of coming into their own now. And then you have kind of that junkyard dog mentality with Marcus Smart. Like, Marcus Smart is like guard Draymond Green to me. He always plays with an attitude. Third game of the year when he's playing Orlando on Sunday night, he's getting into it with the Magic players. I mean, and if you're a Boston fan, you're watching that thinking, this is a team you shouldn't care about at all. They're 0-2, you're 2-0, just get the win. But Marcus Smart is just such a great competitor. I love watching him play. And really, there were a lot of expectations for Boston at the beginning of the year, and I think some detractors thinking, okay, no Ime, then no way they're going to make it to the NBA Finals. But I think when you look at Boston, they're one of the top 3 teams in the Eastern Conference, and probably one of the top 3 to 5 teams in the NBA. When you have those 2 young guys, I would expect that they're going to be a threat to be reckoned with throughout the year. In the East, it's going to be Philly and I think Milwaukee that are really going to threaten them. And I like Boston against both those teams.
All right. I mean, I guess we got to go to Philly now because they are on the opposite end of this right now. They're 0-3. And honestly, like, you want to talk about timing and distractions at the best time. I don't think anyone should be more thankful for the Philadelphia Phillies World Series run than the Sixers right now, because it is totally distracted from the fact that they have probably had the worst start to the season that you could ask for. Now, I will say, again, 2 of these losses are to Boston and Milwaukee. Milwaukee at home, Boston on the road. But I will say, like, that's kind of the thing, though, right? Is like, if you're going to get over the top, if you're going to be this championship level team that, Joel Embiid said at training camp, it's championship or bust to him. Well, start beating Milwaukee and Boston then. Like, I think from a matchup perspective, they'll always match up better with Milwaukee, just because I think Embiid is one of like maybe 2 people in the NBA who can at least give Giannis a fair go on the defensive end. Where, I mean, Boston just Al Horford's been a weird Embiid kryptonite his whole career. Like, it just has been. But yeah, I mean, it's been disappointing. I mean, Embiid had 40 against the Spurs the other night and they lost, but it's like, that's a game you have no business if you're losing at all. Like, you can stomach the first 2, but like losing to San Antonio is pretty inexplicable, even if they're, playing hard and starting the season well. Like, that just shouldn't be happening. James Harden's looked good. I mean, he looks slimmed down. He does look a step quicker and he looks healthy. So I think that's encouraging. But, in a weird way, like, I don't know. They need to start figuring it out a little bit. Like I'm not going to jump off the cliff after 3 games here with anybody, let alone them. I think there are a lot of new faces, but I mean, I think the early concerns are defensively. They haven't been there really. The defensive rating is terrible. And even Embiid, like Embiid, for as great of a defender as he is, he hasn't looked that great defensively to start the year. And just the bench, to me, the biggest upgrade for the Sixers was not even just Harden slimming down. It was the bench. I thought the depth was a lot better this year. So far, it's been pretty non-existent in all 3 of these games so far. I think they're killing Indiana as we speak, which like they need to win a game. I joked on the podcast. I guess it was a joke, but it's getting a little dangerous. I said if we start 0-6, like Justin and I may just got to hang it up. Like I don't know why I settled on that number, but it was like I might be it. We're at 0-3, like we're in spooky territory. I feel pretty good about this Indy game that maybe we'll be all right, but yeah. Not great.
As we're talking right now, Philly's up 64-46 at half against the Pacers. So you should feel pretty good there. I think that if you're a Sixers fan, you're encouraged that James Harden looks about as in shape as we've seen him look in quite some time, and engaged too, right? I mean, yeah. I looked it up. He's averaging 26 points, 8 rebounds, 9 assists per game. He's top 25 in the NBA in PER. Like James Harden looks like he came in ready to try to make a difference this year. The concern I would have had if I was a Sixers fan like you, Kev, was you've wasted 3 to 4 really good high premium, like grade A years from Joel Embiid. And he's the type of player where at some point in time, he's going to come back and he's just not going to have it the same because of the injury history, because it just this happens with bigs. That would have been just, I don't want to say concern, but that would have been the thing that goes bump in the night for me. It would have kept me up that, let's say Harden comes back, he's ready, but it was like 2 trains passing in the night. And Joel Embiid just wasn't ready to go this year for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or he just lost a step. We'll have to wait and see on that. You're right. Defensively, he hasn't quite looked the same. But Philly is also, it's a veteran team. They've got a lot of guys that have been, kind of around the block. I will always have kind of a red flag or an asterisk on Doc Rivers teams. They never seem completely, buttoned up, whether it be during the regular season or the playoffs. So I think if you're Philly, you're optimistic about James Harden. But really, you look at Boston, you look at Milwaukee, they are playing with a different kind of intensity than Philadelphia is right now. Those two teams are playing, Philadelphia is playing like they've made it to one of the last 2 NBA finals, when really Boston and Milwaukee are the 2 teams that have made it out of the East most recently. I would have expected to see just a little bit more urgency, but that's what we've seen through 3 games.
Yeah, like it's October again. That's the thing, and that's what I've been. Yeah. I think there is always again that perspective. We just started the season, but you're right. I mean, it's like you have the opportunity to make an early statement. Like everyone's going to go through ups and downs. It's the way the regular season goes. Like even great teams, like I think Milwaukee and Boston, are going to have losing streaks at some point where, maybe there's a hold up, maybe there's a minute of hesitation. But you're right. I mean, they're just flat out playing better right now. We don't need to redo the Doc Rivers thing. They should take a note from the World Series NL champion Phillies. And maybe if they fire their coach when they have a great alternative on the bench in one Sam Cassell, maybe they'd improve. Because you're right. I mean, that would be the only good thing about the Sixers stars. It's like, if they're bad enough to fire Doc Rivers, like that'd be great. Like I would love to see Doc take a hike. And it's a big reason, you're right, why I do have less faith in them in the playoffs. I don't have faith in Doc Rivers. That just it is what it is. I mean, other surprises or not really surprises. I'm just kind of looking at the standings right now in the East. Donovan Mitchell's off to a great start in Cleveland, averaging 33 points a game. Their underlying numbers are really good to start the year so far. DeJounte Murray's off to a good start in Atlanta too, kind of the same one. 2-1 to start. So that's new guys and new faces and new places. Brooklyn's only played 2, so it's hard to tell. And again, they're adjusting with Ben Simmons. I think everyone, at least in Philly, got a kick out of his first line. I think realistically, though, he's still getting back. He did a lot of what he does well, right? Like Ben, when he drives and gets that lane and uses his physicality, like he can make an impact that way. He's never going to shoot the basketball. Like, I think any Brooklyn fans need to give that dream up very quickly. But Brooklyn's another, again, too, where there's just so much chemistry. And I think, if anything, if I have a stance early on for Brooklyn, it's that they just need to pick up their interior defense. Like, that's what did them in last year, was their defense. It wasn't the offense. It was that they couldn't really stop anyone. They're still for sure a work in progress on that front, but they've also played a game less. So you don't want to, it's going to really be hard to tell with Brooklyn early on.
Yeah. I think Brooklyn could use a guy like Jared Allen. Oh, wait a minute. That's right. They traded Jared Allen for no particular reason, too.
No, it was for DeAndre Jordan. It was because they wanted to make them happy. And so they brought DeAndre Jordan in instead, when they had a literally a better option already in place, who looks like a defensive player of the year candidate right now in Cleveland. Okay.
I think they were just overrating Nick Claxton too. And I like Nick Claxton, but like Jared Allen's a better basketball player than Nick Claxton is. Right?
Yeah, I think Claxton's a good story because, again, the way he came up, like, he's one of those G League feel good homegrown guys. Like, I think Nick Claxton's a fine, like, backup big, genuinely. Like, I think he's a great big off the bench. But yeah, I think they need him to be a starting caliber center right now. And I just don't think you're going to see a ton of results on that front. Again, a little more of a backup guy in my eyes. Let's see. Let's go out west a little bit, because the West is fun. I love the way Denver started. I'm still a Denver truther. I'm always going to be. I really want that Denver Golden State matchup. Phoenix, man, I'll tell you what, I've been really low on Phoenix on the show recently. I got to give them a lot of credit for winning that first game against Dallas, because that was like, and the way that Dallas was, they were big on them too. So like, it looked like you don't want to have those mental blocks start to build up, right? Where it's like, oh man, are we going to go through this again? Phoenix needed that win desperately to just start the season on, you don't feel like you're just reliving it, your nightmare over and over again. You want to start fresh. You want to turn the page a little bit. So that was a more, again, says zillion times this episode, we're really early in the season, but that feels like a pretty good win for Phoenix to turn the page here and get into the new season.
Kind of exercising the demons, right? And it's not just of last season, but the off season with all the Sarver stuff. And they're a strange team. Like, a lot of people jumped off the Suns, even though they're bringing back a really good roster. And they're one of those teams though that I look at and it's like, all right, do I think that they're a top 3 team in the Western Conference? Maybe, depending on kind of how Chris Paul ages and whether or not they can get a little bit more out of, some of the younger guys on that roster. But the team that's really caught my eye, Kev, that through the first week of the season or so, how about a team that beat the Suns? Portland's 3-0. Like, yeah. I've really enjoyed watching Portland play. And I watched a little bit of the Lakers game, but they start off the season, they beat the teams they needed to beat too, which is what you need to do to make the playoffs in the West. You beat the Kings, you beat the Suns, you beat the Lakers. They got their next game's up against the Nuggets. But Damian Lillard has come back from injury and he's looked like he hasn't skipped a beat. Portland's kind of fun to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, healthy Dame is really great to see. It's the roster stepping up too. I mean, it's Anthony Simons picking up where he was last year. It's the Jeremy Grant addition who you thought could be there.
Yeah.
It's Yusuf Nurkic looking re-energized. How about Shaedon Sharpe, who's looked great? Only 19 years old, ton of potential there. So yeah, I mean, if nothing else, they're a supremely entertaining watch. They do look like early on, because I mean, that's the thing, is like, I had them. The trio I always kind of had them around was Sacramento and the Lakers. They look definitively better than both of those so far. Again, I don't want to be too down on Sacramento, because Sacramento's really had to run a gauntlet to start the season. But I think Portland, maybe we could start to elevate even a little bit over the Lakers. And I don't know if that's more of I'm higher on Portland or lower on the Lakers, but it feels certainly right now like Portland's floor is a whole lot higher.
Yeah, I'm ready to say, like, Portland's at least a play-in team in the West, and I think we were coming to the season when they were on that bubble. They're a top 10 team in the Western Conference, and they may be closer to 8 than they are 10 at this point in time. Like, I enjoy watching them play.
The big question you always ask when you look at the standings and you make the predictions, right, is who do you knock out? And so when you look at the West last year with 10. I think the initial candidates for everybody are San Antonio and Utah, who ironically, of course, is recording this podcast, are 3-0 and 2-1 respectively. But I think realistically, those are the two playoff teams that are going to drop out. I think everybody else between New Orleans, Phoenix, Golden State, Minnesota, the Clippers, Denver, Memphis, like Dallas, you could all lock them back in, no doubt about it. And then so at that point, you had 3 spots left between Portland, between Sacramento, and between the Lakers. I think Portland, yeah, you can definitely elevate them at least to that play-in spot, if not battling for a full-in spot. I mean, I don't think there's a huge difference between Portland and a Minnesota necessarily, and New Orleans necessarily. The conference is tough. That's the reality of it. But they're going to hang with anybody. And I mean, the biggest thing too is, again, Dame Lillard being healthy. He's going to make history at some point this season when he passes Clyde Drexler as well. So that's the other thing too, is like he's for sure left an imprint on Portland. Like he is probably going to be Mr. Trailblazer when all is said and done.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you're glad to see him kind of stay. Now, will he finish his career there? Who knows? I mean, those guys are becoming fewer and fewer in the NBA year after year. But you'd think if he was going to bolt, he would have done it, right?
I know, that's my thing. And that's why I'm more inclined to say if there's anybody that is going to be the one who finishes his career, you know, kind of the way that Dirk did in Dallas, obviously the most recent big example there. And then Kobe, of course, with the Lakers as well. But you know, with it's really, really, I mean, yeah, it feels like if Dame was going to leave, he was going to do it 2 years ago, right? Like he went to the bubble and then they went the year after. They made the conference finals. Like he's had plenty of opportunities to basically get out of Portland, and they've more or less, because you know, I mean, the him and CJ McCollum rosters were now basically going to be a full, when this year is done, a full year and a half removed from. They basically could have torn it down at that point, gotten a whole lot for Damian Lillard. And I mean, I think every superstar on earth was trying to recruit Dame, right? Like Dame is still at the peak of his powers. He's going to be a guy that realistically ages well. I mean, we're already seeing it this season. Yeah, but you're right. It feels like if he was going to leave, I mean, you never want to rule it out because, again, Dame is one of those guys who has a skill set that's going to age well. You could see him playing for another 5-6 years and no one would really bat an eye at it. But yeah, I will. Maybe I'm more interested after he breaks the Portland record. Like there's really nothing else to prove there. If they're competitive, it feels like he's going to stick around. But I mean, he's never asked out. Like that's the thing. It feels like he put him on the hot seat, like we said 2 years ago. But he didn't leave though. That's the thing, is he stayed. He could have, like, they made the moves essentially to be like, hey, we're kind of rebuilding a little bit. I also think some other things have helped. Like Anthony Simons is way better than people thought. Like, I think, you know, you trade CJ McCollum and you more or less have a guy that played that role right in his place. Like, I think they're, in his mind, maybe there's a give it one more shot. But I mean, I also, like, he could have gone and played with LeBron and Anthony Davis, like before they made the Russell Westbrook trade. Like, I'm feeling a lot better about the Lakers today if that happens. There are plenty of other contenders that, you know, he could have forced a trade. And Portland would have probably been willing to let it happen too, because I know it's an icon. It's hard to trade, but if you recognize that you're not going to win a title together, you're going to get a massive haul for Damian Lillard. Like, he's one of those guys who's going to command a zillion picks still.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some players, I think, this is going to sound disrespectful. I don't mean it to be, but I mean, there are some players who have the stomach to do the public trade demand, and then there are some that don't. Dwight Howard never had the stomach to do it in Orlando. He did it through his agents and kind of worked his way out. Dame kind of falls into that category for me. Like, Dame wants the fans to love him there in Portland, but 2 years ago, he played around with the idea of getting out. And, you know, I guess to Portland's credit, kind of a la Daryl Morey last year in Philadelphia, they were like, we're going to wait. You're under contract for a long time. You have control. You have a say, but you don't have total control here. We're going to try to build the roster, and they've done a really good job with it. So the issue I think that they're going to run into is, even at the best case scenario for this roster, they're not stiffing Golden State, right? I don't think they're better than, let's say, Phoenix, or I like Denver better than them still too. So, I mean, like, they're still like a 4, 5, 6 seed in the West, even at their best. And I think that's where a guy like Dame looks around and says, if I want to win a title, and that's what we need to know about Dame, is he going to prioritize the title or the longevity in Portland? I would prioritize the longevity in Portland because that's cool. You don't see that anymore, at all. But that's the only thing I think that'll cause him to ask out is, he wants to go make a run at that title.
Yeah, and it sure feels like, again, it's just he would have done it already. I guess that's why it seems like he knows more than anybody that those years are ticking away. Like nothing is for sure a guarantee. Um, because you're right. I think in terms of the ceiling, like I'm right there with you, and it feels like that's been the story for the past 4, 5, 6 years. Right? Is that the Portland team? Like they've never been bad. Portland, other than last year, and that I would argue is more due to injuries than anything. Portland
Yeah.
has never been bad since Damian Lillard has been there. I just think like they hit the conference finals that one year. At least with that version, that was the ceiling. I think this team is pretty good, but you're right. Like I look at that roster and I go, yeah, this is a good basketball team. But if I'm picking right now, yeah, the Warriors, the Clippers, the Nuggets, and that's not even like those are just the slam dunks. That's not even including all the other teams that I think definitely could
Dallas.
beat them in a series. Dallas, Memphis, even New Orleans, arguably, like down the line. Like there are a couple of teams that we're sure we're probably missing one of them without a doubt. But yeah, this is not a guarantee by any means. And I mean, to me, it sure is clear and seems like that Dame is prioritizing his legacy in Portland. That's fine. Like, I will never, if that's what somebody wants to do, you're right. They are few and far between at this point. Like, there's nothing wrong with being a Hall of Famer, being arguably the greatest player in your respective franchise's history, one that's been around for a long time, one that has a championship pedigree at times, with back all the way with Bill Walton. So it's tough. It's one of those, it is. It's what do you want out of it? I don't think there's a wrong answer necessarily. I probably, if I'm Dame Lillard, if I was morphed into him, I'd want to go chase the title because you've done everything you can in Portland. Like there's nothing left to prove there. I also understand though, like you just got to, guys are comfortable where they're comfortable. Like isn't really a price that you can put on that. It is a big change. Like when your whole family has lived in one city for the past decade plus, when you essentially, Damian Lillard was 19 years old his rookie year in Portland, something like that. Like he quite literally grew up there more or less. I can completely understand why he wants. Oh, he's 22, a little older.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, because he was a Weber State guy, right? So he was definitely not a one and done guy. Yeah.
No, yeah, it's true. I mean, he came in and took the rookie year. That rookie year was he took it by storm. He had that shot
32.
against Houston.
Yeah, he's still only 32 years old. Like he's younger than I thought he was, and he's probably got about 4 to 5 years left.
That's so crazy because he could probably hang in Portland for 3 years and still probably ring chase somewhere and not be at a point where it's like, oh, he's just hanging out on the bench getting the freebie ring. Like, no, Damian Lillard, I think could definitely, again, I don't know that he'll be Mr. Dame time in 3 years, but listen, like I said, he can shoot the basketball. This isn't a Russell Westbrook situation where, Dame is super athletic, but like that's not only his game. Like Damian Lillard can get you in a lot of ways.
He's going to look great coming off of Golden State's bench in their 6th straight title run or something like that.
They can't, dude. They cannot let that happen. And I know that he might because it's Oakland. Like that's the thing.
Yeah,
like, you got the hometown pull there. He should have gone with LeBron and AD recently, at least, if he wanted to make a title run, because that team would have been. I mean, they hadn't burnt the bridges yet. Like they were still within. I mean, that's within 2 years of the bubble run. It's remarkable. Like again, I don't want to make this a super Lakers podcast, but like, man, the Lakers really you can't really downplay it because it's like, oh, we won a title. Like that's a pretty big, important thing. Like I have never seen a title in my lifetime. I would do lots of things for that one title, but boy, that sure seeming luckier than anything, right? These days, like they just hit every button right that bubble year, and since then have promptly self-destructed it so fast to the point that it's now one of the worst situations in the NBA.
Can you imagine if that didn't happen? Like if they didn't win the title in the bubble in 2020,
it'd be a train wreck.
It would, absolutely. I mean, I'd go as far as say LeBron wouldn't be there. LeBron wouldn't have signed the extension. He would have moved on, I think. If they hadn't won the title in 2020, LeBron would have found a way to Phoenix. He would have found a way to, it's interesting. So where does LeBron go?
Anywhere. He'd have his choice of contenders. That's the thing, is like you pick your contender here and make your case to LeBron James, and he would probably make their way
he would have left.
there.
He would have left because it's been an absolute train wreck. And I'm surprised that Pelinka got the extension.
Me too. And that's the craziest part is like Pelinka, again, I know he got them to a title, but it's like Pelinka does not deserve that extension at all. Like if nothing else, like that Russell Westbrook trade should knock your eligibility out for that extension. Like that move right there should be it.
Yeah, it's unrecoverable. No one wants the contract. Nobody. I mean, it used to be there was a time, Kevin, where if you were offering 2 first-round picks or at least a first-round pick for a guy like Westbrook, that might put a couple of butts in seats at least. You could get off the contract, but literally no one will take it. Like
No.
the Spurs won't. The Spurs want to lose every game this year, and they won't take. They traded their point guard. They won't take the money.
Yeah.
They won't take the picks. It's amazing.
But that's the problem is it's like because you might accidentally tank your way out with Russell Westbrook. That's the thing is it's like if you put him in a high usage situation, maybe he does have just enough to accidentally win you a game or two. Like he turns back the clock one time. But you're right. I mean,
wouldn't you just do the SGA thing? Wouldn't you just if you're San Antonio, wouldn't you just trade for him, take the 2 first-round picks, and then tell him like, hey, we're not going to play you?
They should. I mean, that's what I would do. I mean, more or less what Houston did with John Wall, where it's like, hey, we appreciate you. You're here, but we're just going to have you kind of go away right now. I don't know. I mean, it sure seems like, but if you're the Lakers, it's tough because I don't know how much LeBron and Anthony Davis are putting on you. And when the rest of the roster is this uninspiring, it's like, yeah, so fine. You trade Russell Westbrook, you trade your 2 first-rounders. So, like, the best case scenario is you're probably getting, like, what, Buddy Hield and Miles Turner from Indiana. Like, is that the addition that's going to bring you over the top with LeBron and Anthony Davis? Like, you'll for sure be better. Like, I'm not suggesting, like, they would be a definitive play-in team then. But, like, okay, cool. Like, that's your ceiling with a LeBron James team. Like, it is almost at the point where, again, you don't want to punt. We talk about punting years, especially punting LeBron James years. But you kind of have to. And at least Westbrook is expiring next year and you have all that money. Like, I don't know if you have faith in your front office to spend it, but at least it's out there.
Yeah, I know. I think you got to do it. I would have to trade him. You're only going to have finite opportunities in order to, take advantage of the LeBron years. And that's already, you already have 1 title. It's kind of, I don't want to say it's gravy because everyone looks at that 2020 title and they don't really call it a legitimate title, or some don't.
Stop it. I hate that. Don't perpetuate that nonsense. Come on.
I'm saying some people said. I'm not saying it.
Many people said, yeah, I know. Come on.
Well, at the same time, I do think like there is a little bit of like, okay, they won the 1 title. I think the expectations were that they would get more than the 1 title, especially after you won it in 2020. And now you didn't think you'd be in this situation. I think I'd have to move them. I think I'd include the picks. And I know you want to protect yourself for the future, but also if you're Rob Pelinka, and Frank Vogel should have thought this way too, though we don't know what Frank was saying, you're not going to be there to use those picks anyway, man.
Yeah.
Trade it. Like that's what Rob Hennigan in Orlando. Bad example. I'm not going to use him.
Yeah, but I was going to say, wait a minute. No one should ever be doing what Rob Hennigan did in Orlando.
Plenty of GMs are trying to plan for the future, even though they could very well not be there to use those assets. So, like, not everyone's Sam Presti. If I'm Pelinka, I'm trading. I'm bringing in Buddy Hield because you never know. Steph twists an ankle. Luka sprains his shoulder, and all of a sudden, like the Western Conference looks a lot different.
Jokic gets hit by a bus. Gets lost in Serbia. Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards get their visas denied somewhere. Who am I missing? Kawhi Leonard he just finally turns into dust. Like then maybe the Lakers window will be wide open. And then by the way, whoever comes out of the East, Giannis eats some bad tzatziki sauce like the week of the finals or something like that, or God forbid gets COVID. I feel like that's not funny to joke about at this point.
Listen,
but
Giannis, go to the best tzatziki sauce in Orlando. Great corner. Gotta go.
Yeah. Oh my God, I miss it so much. I miss it so much. I've always said, how I don't need to tell you, but for the non-podcast listeners, like Orlando is a really underrated food scene in general, just outside of like the parks. Like the parks have great food at this point, genuinely. Like Disney and Universal, all those places like have great restaurants attached to them. All the hotels obviously have great stuff, but like underrated food city for sure. I don't know what the Orlando staple is. I was trying to figure that out the other day. That's probably for a podcast later, or if there was a show that started with 3 letters, maybe they could get to the answer and figure that out.
I feel as if I've done this segment a few times.
It's wild. In a past life somewhere along those lines, you may have done that segment. MVP race, that's the only thing before I get you out of here. I want, because you mentioned Giannis. He's certainly, I think, which is crazy because he's already got 2 of them, but it feels like he's right back in the mix to win another one. early other ones, contenders for me, John Morant, Jason Tatum, like I said a little bit earlier, Luka, I think was the default choice. Anybody else that you think is jumping off the page earlier? Anybody you think can really kind of take the reins here?
I like the John Morant pick a little bit, especially if Memphis, they're without JJJ. So I mean, I kind of think Ja is a guy to keep an eye on. That's for sure. I would love to see Jokic make a run at a third straight, but there's just no way anyone is going to vote for him a third time, even though he's going to end up being one of the best players in the league.
He won't have the narrative without Murray and with Porter Jr. back. That was the big thing too, especially last year. Is it's not only was he historically great, he also just everyone knew that he was playing without his second and third best players. He's already he's got both of them back. And that's kind of the fun of the Nuggets, right? Is that there's no excuses. They're finally can make a real run at this. It's been a lot of talk. Now it's hey, let's go win some basketball games.
Yeah, you want to talk about a real narrative. What about one of the members of the Phoenix Suns? What if Phoenix bounces back this year after the disappointing exit? They had the whole Sarver thing. It would have to be one of Chris Paul or Devin Booker. I don't know if Paul's going to play enough games or minutes, so it would have to be Booker or someone like that.
I think it'd be Book. Book is the only one I think that genuinely is a shot. I don't think Ayton's good enough, and I think Chris Paul kind of is declining a little bit. So, but now Book has the potential because if Book carries them and if Chris Paul actively declines and it really starts to turn another way and Book starts scoring in bunches, I could see that happening for sure.
One more, because I just I don't want to mention Kawhi or Paul George. I'm good, thanks. I just want to watch the Clippers play actual basketball with these guys for a little while. I would love to see a Zion MVP push.
Oh, yeah.
New Orleans is just top 4 team in the West. They're fun. Zion's just bouncing all over everybody. I'd love to see a Zion MVP push.
I mean, that would be the best case scenario. I mean, the vibes are already high. We've been talking about that a lot already. But, I mean, yeah, just the fact that we're talking about Zion Williamson playing basketball, again, that's been my favorite thing is that, hey, we're here. We have real games. He's on the floor. I mean, yeah, great start for New Orleans. I mean, that's the ceiling, right? That win against Brooklyn in their first one of the season. That's what everybody was excited about. Hopefully these injuries they've got Herb Jones is missing a game already. Yeah. Brandon Ingram got hurt at the end of the other game. So you're hoping, again,
Zion too.
Yeah, you don't want that bug coming back already, but definitely the signs are there for the Pelicans to be a pretty fun team this year. He's Nick Gryniewicz. Follow him on Twitter at GetNickG, the voice of the Lakeland Magic. I realize now, an hour into the show, that I never did a formal intro. I just kind of got with it because, that's just how it goes sometimes. So you can find the podcast. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We will read them. Justin will actually not be back next week. Justin has another wedding, but I actually may get to see him in real life. He's coming back to the Philadelphia area, so that's pretty fun. Hopefully I get to see that. I don't know who's filling in yet, so stay tuned for that. Thank you again, though, for Nick for listening this week or for filling in this week. You can watch the podcast on YouTube, be our latest subscriber, just at Driving Dish NBA podcast. Again, the show is anywhere you can find a podcast.